Losers, I'm Coral. Welcome to my channel. If you're joining me for the first time, I typically read books that are strange and eerie. If you're into that, welcome to the party. I'm here today with the books that I finished in December. I read up until the very last MFing day of the year. It's my last 2024 wrap up. I hope you're excited to hear what I read. Boy, it feels like I read nothing and so much all at the same time. But in the second half of December, I managed to finish 4 books, although there was I finished 4 books. There was another one that I started and DNF'd. I'm going to tell you all about it, starting with my wrap-up stats for the entire month of December. In total, I read 10 books, which includes 1 DNF. 6 of those books I owned previous to 2024, so those are books that I consider to be on my TBR. I read 3,446 pages, which is about 111 pages per day. 7 of these books were horror, 2 were fantasy, and 1 was romance. The oldest book I read this month came out in 1983, and the most recent was a 2025 release. I also like to keep track of the series that I'm reading because I have a habit of starting series and not finishing them. Reading the first book and then being like, that's nice, and then forgetting about it for years. So I did start one series this month that actually it was a series I borrowed from a friend. I have the second book now. So actually I should probably read that in January. I totally forgot about that. The second one, I'm very proud of this. I read a book in a series that got me caught up with the series. Although now the next book is coming out this month in January. So I'll have to read that. But it won't be one of those things where I have to reread the first 2 books because I no longer know what's going on in the series. So that's good. Congratulations to me. So let's get on with this. The book that I'd like to talk about first is one that I read that was an e-arc. I got this from NetGalley. I can't remember what month it came out in, but this is The Night Guest by Hildur Knutsdottir. This was translated by Mary Robinette something. God damn, I forgot her name. But this was originally, I believe, written in Iceland. That's where the author is from. And so it was translated into English. I think originally came out a couple years ago, and now just recently in 2024 was translated into English and in the market for English readers. And I really enjoyed this. This was a really quick story. This is a novella, and it's one of those books where you pick it up and then you just don't put it down again until you're done. For me, at least. But I've also heard this from other people. So it's like one of those stories where it just starts and you're in it and you need to know what's going on. This is about a woman named, I think the way you pronounce it is Ethan. And she is like a 30-something woman living by herself. She does have some trauma in her past, but that doesn't come up until later in the book. The main problem is that she's waking up and she's feeling terrible, worse than when she went to bed. Not just not rested, but her body aches. She has these strange bruises. She feels like she's been smashing her body into a brick wall all night long. But how could that be? So she goes to the doctor. She's worried, do I have a blood cancer? Do I have leukemia? Am I ill? Do I have some sort of psychological illness? Am I depressed? So they're running a battery of tests to figure out what's going on with Ethan, and nothing comes back positive. But Ethan does start to suspect something is wrong when she gets a step tracker, and she wakes up one morning after wearing it to bed on accident and finds that she's walked 40,000 steps or something like that, something crazy like that, in her sleep. So she's like, oh, I'm sleepwalking. But it is a little more than Sleepwalking. It's a little darker and spookier than Sleepwalking. And this is a book that made me feel very anxious. It's one where I wanted to be like, I just wanted to yell at like the cast of characters around the main character and be like, it's not what it looks like, you know what I mean? It's not what it looks like, I swear. Leave her alone. So yeah, it was very intense, and the ending is very ambiguous. You really just don't have any idea, at least I didn't. It's just like very up for interpretation. And I liked that. I know some people did not like that, but I liked that. So yes, a great book about sleep and siblings, and takes place in a foreign country from America. So if you're looking to read something out of Iceland, there you go. I thought this was really excellent. Then on to the physical books, starting I guess with, because this is at the top, Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I actually had this on my list to read in January, but then I don't know, my reading's been kind of strange the last couple weeks. I've been reading bits and pieces of a lot of things, and I just happened to pick this up, and then I just didn't set it down again. So this is the second book in the, I think it's called the Empyrean series. The first book was Fourth Wing, which I liked. And this one, I don't know, I feel very mixed about it. This is a fantasy story, and the main character is going to a war college. She bonds with a dragon, and there's also a rebellion going on. So in this second book, there's more of that stuff, obviously. But my issue with it is that these characters, I believe I read at one point that they're supposed to be like 21 years old, and the main character does not read like that at all. She reads like she's out of a YA book. She reads like, and I know that this has some crossover, but I think this is intended for an adult audience. The main character is supposed to be 21, I'm fairly certain, and she reads like she's a 16-year-old, and so she's, I think, annoying. I think she's immature, which doesn't make sense for this sort of setting. And I have this problem sometimes. The characters, because they're in this situation where there's so much shit going on, she's going through this like intense military training that should, you would think, make people wise beyond their years. And instead, she's a 21-year-old that seems like she's 16. So there's like lots of relationship stuff in this that was so annoying. She's just very annoying. And then there's something with like an ex-partner of somebody that comes up later on, and it's like, why did this have to be in here? Because then it's like even fucking worse. It's so much worse. And it's so annoying. But like, I think that the plot is really interesting. Like, interesting enough for me to read the third book that's coming out this month. I just hope she gets less annoying. I didn't think she was so annoying in the first book. This book, it was like, ugh. And this is like 400 pages of things that didn't need to be in there, I feel like. Not 400 pages of that stuff, but this is a long book, and I think a lot of it was like unnecessary filler. And I'm not really sold on the ending, but I fucking read it. So there we go. I actually read mostly books I didn't like this month. Like Where the Dead Wait by Ali Wilkes. This was published in 2023, and I didn't like this author's first book, but I got this one in a Nightworms package, so I held on to it because I was like, maybe it was just a first book thing, but it wasn't. It was also a second book thing, and I feel really bummed about that because the settings for her stories are like something I love. Both of her stories have taken place in the Arctic, and they're like historical horror, but I feel like very light on the horror because there's not a lot going on in either of these books. And also, I keep comparing it to The Terror by Dan Simmons, which I loved immensely. It was one of my favorite books the year that I read it. And this blurb has been on both the books now, that Omakatsu said, better than Dan Simmons' The Terror. Which book is she talking about? It can't be both of them. Why would she say the same quote for the same book? Anyway, I kept comparing this to The Terror. It had some similarities. And The Terror is a really, really long book. And The Terror is very slow paced. And so is this. But unlike this book where the dead wait, The Terror has shit happening in it. This, what did they do? I don't know. I can't tell you a plot. And I felt the same way in her last book, All the White Spaces. And I was sad I didn't like both of these. But this is about a captain who has been kind of shamed in his community because he had a previous expedition into this area in the Arctic and he lost the ship. So everyone's like, oh, you loser, you left your ship, it's lost to sea, you suck. But now he's been tasked with leading another expedition to look for a man and his crew who have been lost in the Arctic, apparently. And they send this lost man's wife with, but also the captain, Day, has a history, somewhat romantic history with this lost man as well. So like there's some tension between him and the wife, and you're not really sure, like, is this guy who's lost an okay dude? It seems like he might not be, but you're not really sure. And even Day himself is like, hope we never find him, kind of. And it's like, that's weird. He flip-flops between like yearning for this man and being like, hope we never find him. And I think that's all I can tell you about it. Not much happens. The end. I didn't like it. I just like, I have to add, I read this book and it was like at no point did I understand where they were and what was happening. There were these like seamless switches back and forth between like the past and the present, but in a way that made it very confusing and not like seamless as in like too seamless as in I don't know what's happening. So I just really did not like that. And I think this is an author that I unfortunately, I get really bummed because this is a horror author writing about a marginalized group of characters. Not that there aren't other authors out here doing that, or authors who are marginalized themselves writing stories, but it always kind of bums me out when I'm like, I didn't like this author stuff, and then they're writing about like voices that you don't hear all the time, especially in horror. I went on way too long about that. Alright, next is the book I DNF'd. This was Winterwood by Shea Ernshaw. This is published in 2019, and this is a YA fantasy book, I guess. I didn't read a ton of it. I read maybe 60 pages, and it just didn't catch me. And I'm not trying to be about that, especially because I already read. I ended up reading, you know, a book that I should have probably DNF'd, and I didn't. But this one is about a young woman who's living alone in like her grandma's creepy woods cabin, and also there's something witchy going on. And in the very beginning of the book, she finds a lost boy, but he's not really a boy. I think he's her age still, so like young adultish. But this boy was supposed to be at like a bad kids camp, I think it is, you know, across the lake from the main character's cabin. He's gone missing in the woods, and she finds him, but like he shouldn't have survived this long because it's days later in the middle of a blizzard, but somehow he's okay, and that's all I know. So there's witchy stuff happening in this. It has a winter setting. I just didn't care about it. All right, finally, I read Dreamcatcher by Stephen King, which came out in 2001. I read a lot of chunkier books this month. There are parts of this I really enjoyed, parts of it I did not. I think I should tell you what it's about, huh? This is about a classic Stephen King plot where these childhood friends are now coming back together as adults. And in this case, they are at their friend's like hunting cabin, and they're hunting, and they're in their 30s. I think there's 4 of them. Yes, there's 4 of them. But there's also a missing member of their crew, because it's a man with Down syndrome named Douglas, but they call him Duddits. This strange thing happens while the 4 men are at this cabin. They find some guy lost in the woods, but it's like his story is very strange. He seems super ill and has like, I don't know, like this strange rash that starts developing on his body. And then the government comes in and they're like, this area is quarantined. And so they're like, ooh, what is happening? And I don't know. There's just, I don't know how to talk about it without saying too much. Or can I say too much? I don't know. This book has been out for so long that there's a movie that I watched that was not very good, but I haven't seen that movie since it came out probably. But I remember thinking this is not very good. And there are elements of this I like I said. But definitely too long, too rambly, needs to be edited down. A lot of story happening that didn't need to be happening. And a big thing that made me just feel like super fucking uncomfortable was the language used around Duddits, this man who had Down syndrome. Just like a lot of weird descriptions, a lot of use of the R word, which like I know wasn't so crazy and like looked down on in 2001, or I mean, I'm assuming he wrote this, you know, probably in the 90s, and then it got published in 2001. Although, I don't know, King writes really quickly, so maybe not, but just like language that was not good. It's like, he couldn't have found any other way to describe this boy, or any other, you know, any other word to speak about him. And it was just like over and over, like every time Duddits would come up. And so it was like, I didn't want to read about Duddits because that part was really shitty. So I don't know, the plot interesting, but I don't really know how to feel about it overall. So that I should have talked about a different book to end with, but I didn't. And I feel like this pile of books is kind of why my reading was kind of strange at the end of the month. I don't know. I started a whole bunch of different things at once, and then now I'm reading like 4 different books at the same time. But then I'll have 4 books done. Or 3. I think I'm reading 3. Either way, that is what I read in December, in the second half of December. That's my last 2024 wrap up. From now on, 2025, where I will be also DNFing books and also probably reading books that I should have DNF'd. So you have that to look forward to. I'd like to say thank you so much for watching this whole year. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Obviously I put time into this, but like you guys also put time into it, and I just really appreciate it. So thank you. I would love to know what you read in December, if there's anything you were excited about, or if you have any opinions on these books that I've read. I'd love to hear it. I will see you. Goodbye.